The grand hall shimmered with golden light, crystal chandeliers reflecting against polished marble floors. Lila Moreau's heart raced as she stepped inside, her small clutch pressed tightly against her chest. She had never felt so out of place. All around her, people laughed and whispered, dressed in gowns and tailored suits that spoke of wealth she could only dream of. Lila had been invited under false pretenses. Her rival, Clarice, had orchestrated her presence here like a trap. Every step Lila took seemed to be watched, judged, ready to humiliate her. She adjusted her dress nervously, feeling like a tiny bird caught in a cage. Then she saw him, a man standing near the edge of the hall, calm, composed, and impossibly poised. He wore a black suit that seemed tailored to his frame like it was a second skin. His eyes, dark and unreadable, flicked toward her just as her pulse quickened. He was not the type of man who belonged here, or perhaps he belonged too well. There was a quiet authority about him, the kind that demanded attention without raising his voice. Before Lila could think, she felt Clarice's sharp presence behind her, her words dripping with malice. "You don't belong here, Lila," Clarice whispered with a sneer. "Everyone will see how small you are." Lila's stomach turned. She couldn't afford to make a scene, not here, not now. The eyes of the crowd would devour her if she stumbled. She needed help, even if just for a moment. Her gaze darted around, searching for a lifeline. Her hand brushed against a gentleman standing nearby. Impulsively, she whispered, "Stay close. He'll think we're together." The man's lips curved slightly at the corner, not with a smile, but with a hint of amusement. "As you wish," he said quietly, his voice smooth and controlled. For a moment, relief washed over Lila. She clung to his arm as if it could anchor her in this sea of glances and whispered judgments. He led her subtly through the crowd, positioning her where no one could corner her, where Clarice's malicious gaze would falter. Lila didn't know his name. She didn't know anything about him, and yet there was a strange comfort in his presence. Time passed in tense glances and careful movements. Clarice tried repeatedly to provoke her, to make her falter. But each time, the man beside Lila was there, a shield of calm authority, his hand brushing against hers ever so slightly as they moved. It was a protective gesture that carried power she couldn't name. "You don't know who he is, do you?" a small voice in her mind warned her. But she pushed the thought aside. Now was not the time to question. Now was the time to survive the night. As the evening wore on, the man's presence became more noticeable to Lila. He was quiet, but every movement he made seemed precise, intentional. He spoke little, yet when he did, his words were measured and thoughtful. The faintest trace of a smile tugged at his lips, but it never reached his eyes entirely. Those eyes, dark and deep, seemed to see everything and yet reveal nothing. It was during a toast that the tension finally broke. Clarice had cornered Lila near the balcony, a crowd gathering around to watch the inevitable humiliation. The rival leaned in, voice sharp and condescending. "Do you really think you belong here, Lila? Do you think anyone would notice if you disappeared?" Lila's hands trembled, her chest tightening with fear and embarrassment. But then the man stepped forward. His presence alone shifted the air. He didn't speak at first. He simply moved between Lila and Clarice, his dark gaze locking on the rival. Clarice faltered for a heartbeat, sensing the unspoken warning radiating from him. "Perhaps you should mind your words," the man said softly, yet the weight in his voice carried undeniable authority. "Words can have consequences." Clarice's lips parted, surprise flashing across her face. The crowd murmured, sensing the sudden tension. Lila felt a strange mix of relief and awe. This man, whose name she still didn't know, had just protected her with nothing more than presence and tone. After a few moments, Clarice backed away, her composure faltering. Lila exhaled slowly, trembling, but grateful. She turned to the man, wanting to say thank you, but he was already scanning the crowd, alert, watchful. The gala continued, but the air had shifted. Lila noticed small things she hadn't before. The way he moved, always aware of every shadow and every person. The way his eyes seemed to calculate risk and protect her simultaneously. She was drawn to him, yet a whisper of caution lingered. Something about him was dangerous, even if she couldn't yet name it. Eventually, the night led them to the balcony. A soft breeze carried the scent of night jasmine, and the city below glimmered with lights that seemed both beautiful and indifferent. Lila felt a strange calm here, away from the crowd. She dared to look at him more closely. "You've been very protective," she said softly. "I don't even know your name." He turned to her, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his eyes. "Names are sometimes dangerous," he replied. "Tonight you may call me Damien." Lila's heart skipped a beat at the sound of it. Damien, strong, smooth, and commanding. She tried not to let her fascination show. "Damien," she repeated quietly, testing the name. It felt both foreign and familiar in her mouth. Their conversation was interrupted by sudden movement. From the shadows of the courtyard below, a figure emerged, a rival gangster clearly seeking confrontation. Lila froze, panic rising in her chest. She had never seen real violence up close, never imagined the cold, sharp edge of danger so close. Damien moved instantly, his composure unbroken. With swift, precise movements, he intercepted the man before he could reach Lila. Words were exchanged, but Damien's tone carried an invisible weight, a threat that needed no force to be understood. Within moments, the intruder backed away, leaving Lila safe but shaken. She looked up at Damien, breathless, and for the first time, she truly saw him. The amusement was gone now, replaced with something darker, authority, power, danger. And yet, he looked at her with an intensity that was almost protective, almost tender, though she didn't know if that was a promise or a warning. You're not just a gentleman, are you?" Lila whispered, awe and fear mingling in her voice. Damien's lips curved slightly, almost a smile, but his eyes remained dark, commanding. "No," he said simply. "I am much more than that. And tonight you have seen only a shadow of it." Lila's mind raced. She had always thought she could read people, sense their intentions. But with Damien, there was nothing simple. Every glance, every word, every gesture was layered with meaning she could not decipher. She felt a pull toward him she could neither explain nor resist. For a long moment, they stood on the balcony in silence, the city lights below shimmering like stars fallen to earth. Lila's heart thumped wildly. She realized she was safe, yet more exposed than ever. She trusted him, and yet she didn't know what she had trusted herself into. As the night wound down, Lila finally allowed herself a quiet thought. This man, this Damien, was dangerous. And yet she couldn't imagine staying away. Something in the way he carried himself, something in the way he had shielded her, drew her closer. It was terrifying and thrilling at once. And then it happened. A whisper reached her from the edge of the balcony, a hint of danger too subtle for anyone else to notice. Damien stiffened, eyes narrowing. He didn't speak, but the intensity in his gaze was enough. Lila followed his look and froze. Someone was watching, someone close enough to strike if given the chance. Her heart skipped a beat. Fear, curiosity, and something unnameable stirred within her. She had clung to his arm at the beginning of the night for protection, never imagining the man beside her was not just a guardian, but a Mafia boss, a master of danger, shadow, and power. Lila's breath caught in her throat. She realized the world she had stepped into tonight was larger, darker, and far more dangerous than she could have imagined. And she was now deeply entangled with a man whose very presence promised both peril and fascination. The wind rustled against the balcony railing. Damien's dark eyes met hers, unwavering, commanding, full of secrets. For the first time, Lila understood that her life, her choices, and her heart were no longer entirely her own. She was in the orbit of a man whose world she had only glimpsed, and whose intentions she could not yet read. And somewhere deep inside, a small, undeniable voice whispered, she wanted to stay close. No matter the danger, the night ended. But the shadows lingered, and the truth of Damien's world waited to be revealed. Cliffhanger. Lila finally realized the man she had clung to for safety all night was not just a gentleman. He was a Mafia boss. The revelation left her heart pounding with fear and fascination, and the shadows of his dangerous world loomed over her future, hinting at challenges and desires she was not yet ready to face. The city seemed quieter after the gala, but the quiet was false. Shadows clung to the alleys and rooftops, moving like silent watchers. Lila Moreau walked beside Damien Caravetti, her steps measured, her mind a whirlwind of questions. She still could not believe what she had learned the night before, that the man she had trusted, even clung to, was a Mafia boss. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear, awe, and curiosity. Damien's presence was still magnetic, his dark eyes scanning every corner of the street as if anticipating danger. Lila's instincts told her to keep her distance, yet her feet moved closer to him, almost against her will. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Damien's jaw tightened and he glanced at her, shadows playing across his features. "Because the truth could have put you in danger before you even knew it existed," he said softly. "You needed to survive the night, and I couldn't risk anyone seeing you vulnerable." Lila's chest tightened. The mixture of protection and secrecy made her feel both secure and more exposed than ever. She realized that she had stepped into a world she barely understood, a world filled with danger and unseen rules. And yet, Damien had not only protected her, he had guided her through it. They walked through the narrow streets, silent but alert. Damien's eyes flicked constantly, noting every shadow, every movement, every whisper of threat. Lila could feel the weight of his power like a storm held in check, ready to break at any moment. She shivered, both in fear and in fascination. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," she said quietly. "No," he admitted, his gaze distant. "And neither are you." They came to a small terrace overlooking the city. The lights below shimmered like a river of stars, calm and serene compared to the tension they carried on their shoulders. Lila leaned against the railing, her hands gripping it as if it could ground her. "I don't know if I can trust this world," she admitted, "or you." Damien stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Trust is earned, Lila, and sometimes trust is a choice you have to make with your heart, not just your mind." She swallowed hard, feeling the truth in his words. Her life had been filled with people who deceived, betrayed, or underestimated her. Yet here was a man whose power was undeniable, whose presence was terrifying, and yet whose actions showed a rare kind of honor. The quiet was broken by a sudden sound, a footstep, light but deliberate, echoing against the stone. Damien stiffened instantly, his body moving like a coiled spring. He motioned for Lila to stay back, his hand brushing hers with a soft but commanding force. From the shadows, a figure emerged, masked by darkness but moving with intent. Lila's heart raced. She realized she was seeing the real danger that had lurked in the background all night, the threat that had always been there, hidden in plain sight. Damien stepped forward, his presence dominating, his calm authority radiating like a shield around Lila. He did not strike immediately, but every movement, every gesture told the intruder that any wrong step would be met with consequences. The tension was palpable, a silent standoff under the moonlit sky. "You shouldn't have followed her," Damien said, his voice low but carrying weight. The figure hesitated, and in that moment, Lila realized how much trust she had in him, how much she relied on his strength, his judgment, and his protective instincts. She was no longer just a passive observer. She had seen his power, and she had felt his restraint. The intruder finally retreated, vanishing into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared. Damien's shoulders relaxed slightly, but his eyes remained vigilant. He turned to Lila, and she saw the faintest trace of a smile, almost like relief that she was unharmed. "You're safe," he said, his voice softer now, almost tender. Lila's chest rose and fell with relief, but she also felt something else, a pull she could not explain. She realized she was drawn to him not just because he was powerful, but because he was honest in a way no one else had been. He was dangerous, yes, but he was also protective, loyal, and unexpected in his kindness. "Damien, why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why protect me? His gaze softened, and for a brief moment Lila saw a vulnerability hidden beneath his dark exterior. Because you are not like the others, he said simply. You see things. You understand courage. You make choices that matter, and I have rarely met someone who deserves protection as much as you do. Lila felt her heart stir at his words. The fear, the awe, the curiosity, all mingled into a confusing mix. She wanted to stay close, to learn more, to understand the man who had become a mystery she could not resist. Days passed, and their connection deepened. Lila began to see the duality of Damien's world, one of loyalty, code, and danger. She watched him make decisions that balanced mercy with authority, and she realized that power could be wielded with purpose, not cruelty. One evening, Damien invited her to his private study. The room was lined with books, the faint scent of leather and aged paper filling the air. He gestured for her to sit, and she noticed for the first time the quiet care he took in his personal space. Every object intentional. Every shadow controlled. I need to tell you more, Damien said, his voice low, serious. There are parts of my life that are dangerous, parts that could hurt you if you aren't careful. Lila nodded, her resolve firm. I want to know. I need to understand. He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing the risk of revealing the truth. Finally, he spoke, telling her fragments of his life, the choices, the loyalties, the enemies, and the burdens he carried. Lila listened, her respect and fascination growing with every word. She realized that his power was not just about fear or control, it was about responsibility and sacrifice. You carry so much, she said softly. Do you ever rest? Damien allowed a rare smile, fleeting but real. Rest is a luxury I seldom have. But moments like this, moments with you, they remind me that there is more to life than shadows and control. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the world outside the room disappeared. Lila's pulse quickened. She realized that her feelings had grown beyond admiration and curiosity. She felt drawn to him in a way that was undeniable. Yet she also knew the danger that surrounded him. Loving him was not simple nor safe. The next day brought news that tested them both. A trusted associate of Damien had betrayed him, setting off a chain of events that threatened the stability of his carefully controlled world. Lila watched as Damien navigated the storm, calm, commanding, decisive. She realized that this was the real man, not the charming gentleman at the gala, but the man whose life was entwined with danger at every turn. You don't have to be afraid, Damien said, sensing her unease. I will not let harm come to you. Lila nodded, feeling a courage she hadn't known she possessed. I trust you, she said. Even if I don't understand everything yet, I trust you. The night of confrontation came swiftly. Under a silvered moon, Damien and Lila faced the instigators of betrayal. Lila assisted him, not with physical force, but with intelligence, intuition, and courage. Together they formed an unspoken alliance, a bond that was as much emotional as it was tactical. In the midst of tension, danger, and whispers of revenge, Lila realized she had transformed. She was no longer just a frightened woman at a gala. She was someone who could stand beside a man like Damien, someone who could navigate the shadows and survive. And Damien, in turn, saw her as more than an innocent bystander. He saw her as an equal, a partner in a dangerous but thrilling dance of loyalty and survival. Finally, as dawn approached, the immediate threat was neutralized. Damien and Lila stood together on the terrace, breathing heavily, hearts still racing from the night's intensity. The city below was quiet, but they both knew this peace was temporary. A sudden whisper reached them, carried by the wind. Someone close to Damien had orchestrated part of the chaos. Lila and Damien exchanged a glance, understanding that the world of shadows was far from behind them. Trust and loyalty would continue to be tested, and their bond, already strong, would face challenges neither had anticipated. Yet as they stood side by side, the first light of day casting golden hues over the city, Lila felt a strange certainty. No matter what shadows remained, she would face them with Damien. He was dangerous, yes, but he was also unwavering, protective, and unexpectedly tender. And she was drawn to him, ready to follow into the unknown. The wind whispered again, carrying both threat and promise. Lila and Damien looked at each other, hearts beating in silent synchrony. They knew the battles ahead would test their courage, their trust and their hearts, but together, they felt unstoppable. The story of their bond, forged in shadows, loyalty, and longing, was only beginning. Cliffhanger. Ending. Even as they survived the night, a whisper of betrayal lingered. Someone within Damien's world had set events in motion that neither he nor Lila could yet anticipate. Their trust and desire would be tested further, hinting at new dangers, new revelations, and the promise of a bond stronger than fear itself.